Now, you know I'm not a great fan of Radio New Zealand, and perhaps the article that I'm about to quote from will just simply confirm every prejudice that exists in me. Listen, I don't pretend, and I never have, to be anything other than a human being and to have all the faults and frailties and foibles thereof. I expect to make mistakes, mistakes of character, mistakes of judgment, mistakes certainly of temperament. Give me a second wine and I'll even mistake, you entering a conversation as a reason for a good debate rather than a discussion. I mean, there's a whole series of frailties that we have as human beings, and there's always the expectation when we're dealing with politics and we're dealing with personalities that people will be perfect all the time, and they won't be. It's just it's just the nature of the human experience that we're basically made to stuff up. And so if you did believe in some all-purpose, omniscient creator, you'd be having a bit of a chat to him or her. Do they have a pronoun? There's a good question. You'd be, upon your demise, assuming that there is life after death, and you'd be going and tap him on the shoulder and say, listen, sport, what happened? Were you not thinking that day? You seem to have missed a bit of detail here. Because, there are aspects of our condition you go, and then you think to yourself, why am I today, more irascible than I was yesterday? Why didn't I think more about that? Why did I act so spontaneously? And to be perfectly honest with you, not a very nice fashion. I have a bit of a theory. It's to do with golf, actually. I've never seen. There used to be a story about you'd never see a happy jogger. You remember that, Josh? It was in the 60s and 70s when jogging was coming in, and it was particularly fashionable, I have to say, in Wellington. And I used to run quite a bit. In actual fact, I've run for over 40 years. I've done it as much for the physical, mental release, I guess. Gosh, I might have even stayed, given my natural proclivity towards insanity, I might have even stayed sane, Josh, as a consequence of running. I think it was a great sport. Any sport is a great sport. Anything that, gets the old endorphins going and the blood rushing around the body, good stuff.
Oh, exercise is so underrated.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much many mental health problems in this country, Josh, just quietly.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
People just don't exercise anymore, don't work physically, don't labour.
The amount of people that I meet at the gym and things like that work out just because of the mental health.
Absolutely.
And people that have got off medications and all sorts due to exercise. It's amazing what it does for you.
And you feel better, Josh.
You do.
I don't know if after a gym session or going for a bike ride or going for a swim or going for just a jog or even a long sort of breathy walk or something like that, you feel better. Anyhow, and that obviously does relate through to mental health. No. I'm sorry, I'm digressing from what I really wanted to talk about, which was that sometimes we should celebrate the most amazing of achievements that we can do as humans. I'm a bit of a believer, always have been in science. Now, I know there are people out there who denigrate science in the wake of COVID or during COVID and stuff like that, but no, I'm a great believer in the pursuit of knowledge for the pursuit of knowledge's sake, Josh. I think that humankind was made to discover everything. There you go, Josh. There's my philosophy. I think humankind was made to discover everything. And so what I mean by that is that the quest of humankind is to find out everything. That's our quest, our job. We are an inquisitive species. We like to know. And in liking to know and discovering information and intelligence, we hope to make ourselves, the human species, and the world a better place. So you see, I'm a bit of an optimistic journeyman, an optimistic explorer. To the frontier we go. What's over the hill? And can it make our lives better? All right. Now, I know this might seem a bit deep this morning, but the reason I'm really enthused this morning and thinking, gee, I quite like being a human, is because of a medical breakthrough that's been reported in the New York Times this morning, and the saving of a 9.5-month-old boy. Now, sometimes it just takes one little example, one child, one person, and their example to, set a beacon for the rest of us. And this little 9.5-month-old boy in the United States of America is that person. His name is KJ. That's okay, two initials, KJ, all right? And his mums and dad are Kyle and Nicole Muldoon. Yeah, there's a name from the political past, which seems redolent this morning. And Kyle and Nicole Muldoon had a little baby boy who was born with a rare genetic disorder, Josh. And Josh, this is known as a CPS1 deficiency that affects just 1 in 1.3 million babies. It's extraordinarily rare, as you can see. And if he had survived, or if he was to survive, he would have severe mental and developmental delays and would eventually need a liver transplant. Now, there are literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who have something wrong with them, possibly 1 million New Zealanders who have something wrong with them. A physical deformity or infirmity, a mental one, the developmental delays that are here, something wrong with your innards. Hey, Josh, you've got that. Something wrong with me.
Yep.
I've got celiac disease, for example. There is cerebral palsy, a whole series of conditions that are out there, Down syndrome, etc.
All genetic, a lot of those ones as well, too.
And they are all and a number of mental health disorders, Josh, from ADD, ADHD through to schizophrenia.
That are created. The genetic links of that too,
and they are exactly they are created by something going wrong in the chemical composition of us being made up as a human being. Well, so it was with KJ, Kyle and Nicole Muldoon's baby, being born with this rare genetic disorder. He was going to die, and if he wasn't going to die, he was going to be severely mentally and physically disabled. All right. Now, they prepared his parents, as they did for me and my daughter, Lucy, as well, when she had her cancer issues. They prepared Kyle and Nicole Muldoon for death. You'll say, here's your prognosis. And Kyle and Nicole did what I did, and my partner of the time did too. Listen, we don't want our child to die, but if they are going to die, for God's sake, make it soon, will you? Because the idea of this little child, our loved child, being in that kind of pain and distress, and then the inevitable demise is not fair. So please end their life as soon as you can. And so they had that discussion, as I'd had that discussion too. So I'm intimately aware of the nature of these things. Many people listening will know that they've had that discussion too about their child, KJ. And then along comes an experimental scientist doctor and a group of them. And they say, listen, they're at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And they say, listen, this is a very grim prognosis, but we'd like to try something if we can. Can you let us try? And then a team led by, as I understand, an Indian American, so from India, Dr. Kiran Musunuru, a gene editing researcher at the University of Pennsylvania. He gets an email from one of the doctors treating young KJ, and he says, could you do something to save the baby? And Dr. Musunuru had been investigating the use of gene editing for fairly common gene mutations. And the problem with KJ was that he had a piece of his DNA which had gone rogue. And we're made of DNA, our gene editing, and it was just one piece of that. And as a consequence of that, Musunuru and his medical team worked with the medical team from the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, and they decided to go and edit one of those genes in the DNA of KJ. And it's an extraordinary process. They were able actually to insert a gene editing technology into the child that found the rogue piece of DNA and corrected it, Josh. It actually searched through KJ's DNA until it found it, saw what it was doing, then repaired it, made it normal, straightened that particular piece of DNA, if you like, and then dissipated. It's job done, Josh.
That's incredible.
And now KJ is walking, discharged from hospital, and living at home and meeting all his developmental milestones, Josh. To all intents and purposes, a happy little 2-year-old boy. Isn't that extraordinary? Now, the implications, this has never been tried before. It's one of the great medical breakthroughs, you'd have to say. Well, yes, we've done gene editing before, but not in a case like this. And now what this does is it opens up this one piece of research, this extraordinary piece of biomedical research and biomedical editing, gene editing. It opens up the ability for all of those physical and mental defects that have the rogue DNA that has caused them to be repaired at an extraordinarily early age. I would think at some stage they're talking about even in the womb, where you might discover through various other pieces of technology that something is or has gone wrong. The result is triumph, it has to be said, for investment in biomedical research. There's no question about that. It's a triumph for science. It's a triumph for the human condition. It has the ability, this gene editing, to change the nature of human experience, to correct anything from muscular dystrophy to, in the future, even the DNA that causes mental health and depressive conditions, disorder conditions, which have a genetic basis as well. Anything that is rogue gene, anything that is caused by misplaced or bad genes, and there are a variety of obviously child and adult afflictions, this new technology,
I'd say it would be at least 80%,
has the ability to correct. It's extraordinary.
Could it be gene-based?
It's absolutely extraordinary. And it makes me, this morning, the reason I'm sharing it with you is because it makes me, I guess, optimistic about the human condition. It makes me aware that we do have a genius, an innate genius in us that we can solve and resolve if we apply science in a benign and, yes, in this particular case, paternalistic way. We can apply it to improve the human condition. We can save lives, we can arrest disorders, which is really, when you think about it, if you think about it, Josh, the nature of medicine full stop, and of all biomedical research going, way back before the English word was spoken on this planet. But this latest breakthrough is yet another affirmation of science, of biomedicine, and of research paying off, and of a very, very... Now, there'll be a whole series of people. There'll be a whole series of doomsayers and naysayers, and the sort of, if you like, the shroud wavers who'll go and say, oh, this is dreadful. You're playing with God. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You're playing with God's imperfections, and you're seeking to cure them, and you are. And frankly, I'm pretty sure that is one of our purposes in life. I want to compare and contrast that, if I might, with then coming back to home. And I want to compare it and contrast with an article that's been published today in the Radio New Zealand. It is of, again, biological research. After the resurrection, you might have read recently, of scientists working with genetic technology able to return something called the dire wolf, Josh. Now, the dire wolf, D-I-R-E wolf, made extinct, all right? A wolf that's bigger than a wolf, But medical research had, in actual fact, made a breakthrough. A biotechnology company called Colossal Biosciences, that's right, achieved a major scientific breakthrough, which they announced, I think, about a month ago, which successfully changed the genome of a vertebrate species and introduced desired trait and created apparently healthy dire wolf pups through, again, altering gene technology. Now, this scientific breakthrough has huge implications. It means that for a number of extinct species, or for those that are heading towards extinction, the opportunity to either bring them back literally from extinction, or as with the direwolf, or in actual fact to save new species or existing species from extinction. Extraordinary. Environmental DNA, essentially, and the like. Now, that's fine. And there is a suggestion, incredibly, by this particular company, Colossal Biosciences, that they could actually do the same for some of the species that have disappeared in New Zealand, Josh. The moa, Josh, has been mentioned. The Haast eagle, Josh. And the other one that's been mentioned is the huia. The huia.
Right, yeah.
All right? Extinct species. Now, you would think, would you not, whoa, go. Off you go. What a brilliant idea. No, and that's exactly what the conversation is at Radio New Zealand this morning and the article that they've published. It's two university academics from Otago University who you think would in actual fact be absolutely chuffed with the idea of having such a desirable outcome of this kind of biomedical and genetic research. Associate Professor Nick Rawlins and Associate Professor Philip Wilcox from Otago University. And they have published, and it has been published by Radio New Zealand this morning, a suggestion that these animals should not be returned from the dead. Why, Josh? Because it might offend Maori cultural values, Josh. This is what they say.
So you're bringing back an animal that they had back in the day, and you're offending them by bringing it back?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. And that unless indigenous voices are created here, then there is the possibility of breaching the Treaty of Waitangi. They make this claim. This is two university professors, all right? Two university professors from Otago University, probably the wokest, if it's possible to get a wokest one, boy, it's heading for it, who say that, quote unquote, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Hapori Maori, which are tribal groups, are the kaitiaki guardians of many threatened taonga, treasured species. There is growing international interest in the resurrection of some of New Zealand's extinct birds, including the moa, Haast eagle, the huia, despite Maori concerns. And their voices in this debate are crucial, as these are the indigenous groups and the biotech proposals are relevant to them. And essentially the argument is that only Maori are the guardians of these species, these extinct species that in the past, and only they should have the say on whether they are resurrected from extinction.
Surely if they're the guardians, I want them to be.
Here we go. The reason those three species are extinct is because of Maori. All right?
Yeah.
That's the reason they're not here. The moa was wiped out by Maori, the Haast eagle and the huia with it. Maori accounted, long before Europeans arrived, I might add, for about, I think we got up to 70, didn't we, species of flora and fauna in this country. They did it all themselves. They're not kaitiaki. They're destroyers. They're as every bit as destructive as Europeans, as Asians, as man anywhere. Ignorant men. Ignorant Maori didn't know anything about conservation and the environment before Europeans arrived, and presumably afterwards either. Why? Because they're ignorant, as we all were as a species at that time about our effects cumulatively and collectively upon the planet and its biodiversity. Well, we're a bit smarter now in the 21st century. We're getting there. And this is one of those getting there moments. But here is two academic researchers who claim that they have consulted with Maori, written this particular article and said that Maori essentially don't want these things to come back from the dead, from extinction, and that only they are the guardians of the environment because these taonga which they destroyed are apparently belong to them. I'm not having a go at Maori this morning. I'm not having a go at a Maori worldview or te ao. I would never clue what it is on this particular issue. But I am going to say, when two academics from Otago University decide to argue against science, decide to argue against trying to repair the biodiversity damage that humankind has done, and then argue speciously that only one ethnicity in this country should control those sorts of conservation efforts, you are joking. Thank God, by contrast, there are these fantastic people in the United States of America who understand that you can use our intelligence, our innovation, our invention to improve the human condition and the condition of the planet. But dear Lord, if we left it to those two academics at Otago University and the Maori view that they express, which I question, but there you go, we would make no progress at all. The contrast this morning has never been more vivid.